Hi, my name is Manjin Kim, and welcome to this month's Deep Thinking. So I wanted to do a video this month about the ancient Mesopotamian religion. That's the religion of Sumer, or Sumer, however that's pronounced, Babylon and Assyria. But I do not know much about the beliefs of that ancient society, and so I realised that I need to do a good deal more research before I do a video about that. I also realised that I needed a kind of bridge video before I started my intended chronological journey through all the beliefs, different schools of thought around faith, science and philosophy over the years. Basically, I promised that these monthly deep thinking videos would deal with religion, philosophy or even science, all the deep subjects. And what we've had so far is two introductory videos, one about does God exist and one about is there life after death. There hasn't been much science so far, so I thought if I delved right from those two big topics into the gods and religions of the ancient world, then many of my atheist viewers might be a bit like what the F and feel disappointed, or more importantly confused and wondering why I lied about the science part. So I'll say it now. I intend to follow the beliefs and ideas people have had at different times and follow those things in chronological order. So there's going to be a lot of paganism for a while before we get to other religions even, and long before we get to any of the science and philosophy. I'm sorry about that. There'll be a bit of science and philosophy when we get to the Greeks and the Romans, but apart from that it might be a bit of a long wait. But I do aim to be sceptical and critical when the subject calls for it, and offer my own unique critique and take on things, so it hopefully won't be too bad for my atheist viewers to stomach. But in the meantime, here is my bridge video from the broad topics of does God exist and is there life after death to the massive chronological journey through the world's developing beliefs and ideas about the deep subjects of religion, science and philosophy. I'm aware that some of my viewers will be atheists while others might be religious. And I'm aware that among those who are religious, there might be a broad range of faiths that people have, from Christianity, Islam and Judaism, through Buddhism, Sikhism and Hinduism, all the way to New Age beliefs and modern paganism. Perhaps even the odd Satanist. Don't laugh, they do exist, and are a genuine religious movement, and no, they don't worship the devil. Do some research. Anyway, I want to talk in this video about tolerance between different religious faiths, and also my own personal philosophy of finding balance between romanticism, poetry, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, and skeptical rationality. One thing that will become apparent as I present my long history of religion, philosophy and science in the world is that I am quite open to and respectful towards a variety of religious beliefs. Whether that be my fascination with ancient pagan religions, my reverence and wonder for the religions of India and the Far East, or my willingness to find something of worth and value in the Bible and the teaching I was brought up in, even if my own interpretation is definitely unorthodox and my appreciation largely metaphorical. Another thing that will become apparent, however, is my enormous respect for the rigorous rational processes of science and the things that have been discovered and achieved through scientific endeavour, and also my intense scepticism about any literal belief in anything supernatural or unexplained. In this modern digital age, when we're all rubbing our opinions in each other's faces with dizzying regularity, as we subject ourselves to information overload when we communicate with each other and share our knowledge online, it can often feel like all the great debates are becoming polarised. The loudest voices get the most attention, and extremist viewpoints can often get more exposure, while gentler, more subtle opinions often get buried beneath all the bickering. This, I feel, is a shame, because I've often felt that it is the quieter voices that speak the most truth. In a way, it's always been this way. The preacher who hates homosexuals shouts his words and opinions through a loudspeaker in the busy market square, while somewhere in a bookstore there is a dusty old tome that no one ever reads that might just change your life for the better. But I do feel that the modern internet age is making this sad situation even more pronounced. And so debates become polarised into different groups of extremist haters and the small sensible voices of gentle wisdom, subtle nuance and genuine peace and positivity often remain unnoticed. A shame. But in navigating our way through the complex moral maze of life, especially as it pertains to philosophy and religion, I would like to propose some ways to hopefully help people of different beliefs and opinions to make some peace with each other, and also present my own personal philosophy of making peace within myself, of honouring both my romantic, spiritual yearnings. By romantic I mean poetic, by spiritual I mean finding moral and emotional meaning, and also my need for clarity, for scepticism and rationality. Firstly, the truths that religions speak of do not need to be accepted literally. Metaphor can often reveal deeper, more life-changing meaning, and this is by no means an inappropriate use of religious traditions. The "it must be literal or else it's false" interpretation of mainly monotheist faiths is actually a new thing, formed in part by a reaction against the findings of science and critical analysis of texts. I'm not saying that certain beliefs in, say, the Christian Church haven't been taken completely literally over the years, or that there weren't superstitious literalist beliefs about a great many things in the past. I'm saying that religions such as Christianity had a wide range of interpretations all through their history. Alongside the superstitious masses of medieval Europe, who not only believed that Noah and the flood, the virgin birth, etc. literally happened, but also believed the old woman who lived down the street might hex them with evil magic, and that there were people overseas who had the heads of dogs. Look it up, people really believed that stuff. But alongside them, and also the Catholic priests who, although a lot more rational in their beliefs, definitely did have an orthodox belief in a creator deity and in the resurrection and miracles of Jesus. There were also, however, various forms of more metaphorical, mystical, even pantheist interpretations of the Christian faith. Not always heretical either, sometimes quite accepted within the rich variety of the Christian Church at the time. And when we look beyond the monotheist faiths of Christianity, Islam and Judaism, to religious traditions such as Hinduism and Buddhism, and to the pagan beliefs of old, there is even less necessity to accept things as literal and even more approval of a metaphorical reading. Hindus come in all stripes. Some accept the gods as literal beings, others accept them as metaphors. In fact, it is a long tradition in Hinduism that the gods are many faces of an ultimately unknowable entity that exists in and through all things. Advaita Vedanta is a philosophy in Hinduism that believes all things, material things, but also the gods themselves, are not ultimately real, and only this unknowable essence is ultimately real. Modern paganism too runs the gamut from literal belief in deities to an almost atheistic, more metaphorical viewpoint. And I'm not totally convinced by our modern patronising belief that this is a function only of neo-paganism and all the ancients were superstitious dupes who believed the myths literally happened. Look at ancient Greece, for example, where philosophers such as Plato and Aristotle surely did not believe in the gods of Olympus as literal beings, but still would have paid lip service to the official religion at state events, for example. People took part in mystery religions for deeper, more life-changing spirituality, and many of those rites and myths clearly had deeper, more metaphorical meanings for those followers than simply being about the agricultural comings and goings of the seasons that they seem to be about on the surface. And philosophical, almost atheist viewpoints were highly influential in ancient Greece and Rome at the same time as civic events when people honoured the great gods. I'm sure other ancient societies had similarly different levels and varieties of practice and belief. Polytheistic societies are usually quite accommodating towards a multitude of different ways of appreciating and interpreting the faith. Myths themselves seem to be stories pregnant with different layers of meaning, and it is insulting to assume that all ancient peoples simply swallowed them wholesale in a literalist, superstitious kind of way. I'm sure there were many people of a more metaphorical faith in ancient times. So recognise, when you are engaging in discussion with someone of a different faith from your own, that there is no shame in finding symbolic meaning in someone else's faith, or in your own. Surely some middle ground of mutual acceptance and respect can be achieved in realising this. Secondly, for all those scoffing atheists out there, just because a religious belief is a metaphor does not mean that it is worthless and should be ridiculed. I mean this in two ways. Even if you can see it as a metaphor and they can't, there still might be something beautiful and worthwhile that they find in that belief, and seeing it as a metaphor can help you understand that. It might be more important that they hold on to that beauty and worthwhileness than that you force them to open their eyes to it not being literally true. But even more importantly, because I have experienced this from atheists myself, if someone has a belief that they appreciate metaphorically and not literally, you do not have the right to tell them that they'd be better off dropping that belief altogether, and why follow something that you don't really believe in. This is nonsense. Metaphor, symbolism, poetry, for that's what metaphor and symbolism are, poetry, they enrich life. And something that is metaphorically true is still true for that person. It represents something that they hold dear, something beautiful and wonderful that they can only hold on to and make sense of by appreciating it as a metaphor. And it might be something that has transformed their life for the better. We do this all the time. It is what art, music, film and literature are all about. What is wrong with taking the deeper meanings that can be revealed through metaphor and symbolism and making a way of life out of them, an identity? I'm sure Lord of the Rings and Doctor Who have transformed many people's lives for the better. What right have you to come in and stomp all over something that someone finds so meaningful, especially when they are under no delusions about empirical scientific reality, while telling them it's not real, you know? They already know it's not literally real, but they find symbolic, metaphorical meaning in it. Meaning that shapes their life for the better. You have no right to stomp on that. It's rude and it's offensive. And this leads me to my own personal philosophy when it comes to matters of religion versus science. I believe in three things: the scientific method, the poetry of meaningful metaphor, and the wonder of mystery. I have found a way to make peace between my need and yearning for poetry and spirituality in my life on the one hand, and my need for the clarity of skepticism and rationality on the other. I accept and admire the scientific method, that rigorous attempt to let the universe tell us its own truths by pushing human bias aside and testing rigorously with evidence and experimentation to let us glean what is really going on in the physical universe. I respect the findings of science, trusting that the scientific method, plus the process of peer review, will ensure that science remains true to this rigorous rationality. And my trust is backed up by the great discoveries and achievements that science has brought to humankind. But I also accept that there is, and on some level probably always will be, some mystery to the universe. I understand that the language we use to understand the universe, including scientific and mathematical language, is a lens through which we view reality, but that reality itself is wild, untamed, and mysterious. It always will be. And furthermore, I feel that is wonderful. And it is something that fills me with awe and reverence. Yes, I revere nature. It is my God in a way. And though it might be dangerous and unkind at times, I respect its wildness and its mystery and find much of wonder in it. And this sense of wonder is what awakens the poetry in my soul. I use the term soul metaphorically here. I am no dualist. And I recognise that as we navigate our way through life, we often feel the need to find meaningful metaphors to enrich our lives. And we often need to tell ourselves stories to help us to navigate the moral complexities of our lives. This is a human need and a purely human perspective. But that does not mean it is not important. And so I recognise this need in me, and I recognise this yearning for poetic metaphor, for symbolic meaning, and I recognise the value that can be gleaned from fiction and art, from pagan myths and Hindu stories, and yes, even from some of the stories in the Bible. If all these things are taken as meaningful metaphors instead of literal truths. I hope that one day many more people will also learn to find peace between their poetic and sceptical sides, and then hopefully we can also find peace with each other and recognise our different faiths and perspectives for what they are. Different stories we tell each other around the campfire. Some of these stories might be less helpful and more faulty than others, and some might be more helpful and less faulty, but they all consist of different narratives we weave, different languages and conceptions that we create to try and make sense and create deeper meaning as we look out into a cold, uncaring, wild, mysterious, but awe-inspiring and wonderful cosmos. Thanks for watching.